I thought I had that on.
Okay.
It's not. Thank you for the opportunity to give my compelling testimony before you today. As you know, last year, a reauthorization of the National Estuary Program, hereinafter referred to as the NEP, was passed unanimously through Congress, demonstrating the strong bipartisan support for this important initiative. The NEP was first established in 1987, and since its founding has proved to be a model for non-regulatory environmental management programs that provide tangible benefits to the communities they serve. There are currently 28 estuaries of national significance that participate in this program. The health of America's estuaries, like the Indian River Lagoon, one of the most diverse in the world, spanning across 5 counties in Florida, in my district and adjacent to a congressional district, is directly related to the health and vitality of our communities and national economy. In fact, these coastal ecosystems and their communities that surround them support more than 69 million U.S. jobs and contribute to an estimated $7.9 trillion to the GDP annually. The genius of the NEP is that it empowers local communities to take responsibility for managing their estuaries and brings together a diverse group of experts and concerned citizens to address threats to these delicate ecosystems. The program correctly recognizes that the people whose livelihoods are directly connected to protecting and restoring the health of the estuaries are in the best position to use taxpayer money responsibly and achieve demonstrable results. In last year's reauthorization, we improved upon this model by ensuring that the EPA spends no more than 5% of appropriated funds on administrative costs at the agency. The reauthorization also directs EPA to use the savings from this reduction in federal bureaucracy to create a new competitive grant program that will provide necessary resources to estuaries with urgent needs. The money in the competitive grant program will be reserved for projects addressing threats like harmful algae bloom, invasive species, and pervasive seagrass habitat loss, problems that get exponentially worse and more expensive to fix the longer they remain untreated. For that reason, I cannot stress enough the importance of having the competitive grant program put in place in a timely manner. The newly reauthorized program and its uniquely transparent funding allocation formula will ensure the local NEP programs get the support Congress intends and prevent further expansion of what we don't intend. In addition to fully funding the National Estuary Program, I encourage the committee to ensure EPA officials reduce costs in compliance with the reauthorization statute and begin administering the competitive grant program as quickly as possible. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. Be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you, Bill. I certainly support estuaries. We have a few on the West Coast, and so it's something that's very important, and I'm sure that we'll be taking a very close look at that program as it goes along. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much for your comments.
All right. Next, our good friend from the state of Utah, Jason Chaffetz, and welcome, Jason. We're looking forward to listening to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Chairman, to the ranking member, and to each of the members here. It's an important opportunity, and I appreciate you hearing us out. I have 3 quick topics I'd like to address. One is the Indian school bus routes. Last year, dirt school bus routes proved impassable on multiple occasions, causing Navajo students to miss 11 school days. I have a county, San Juan County. It's roughly the size of New Jersey. It has 1 stoplight. A portion of the Navajo Nation is in this county, but this is a problem throughout the Four Corners area. San Juan County receives about $85,000 per year from the BIA to maintain roughly 258 miles of school bus routes. That number has stayed consistent over a 30-year period. Since 2005, San Juan County has spent $11 million of their general fund monies to maintain these roads on the Navajo Nation. The imbalance is quite severe. Navajo Nation children, their dropout rates are some of the highest dropout rates in the nation, and yet they're missing more than an average of 1 school day per month, just because they simply can't get to school because of how poor these roads are. And with some indulgence, I have some pictures here, may be tough to see on the television, but that's what they're dealing with on almost a monthly basis. Depends on when it's raining, when the snow is melting. And we've got a host of other pictures. Not only these kids get trapped there, sometimes spending the day and into the night, but the parents know that if it's rainy, they don't even bother to put them on the bus because they may get stuck there and there have been horrific situations. It's been going on for years. We need some help solving it. You can't necessarily just go and pave all those roads either. That wouldn't necessarily be a prudent use of funds, but there are things you can do with gravel and other types of things to make them passable. The second issue I wanted to bring up is the Bears Ears National Monument. On December 28th, 2016, less than 30 days before President Obama left office, he created the Bears Ears National Monument, 1.35 million acres. This is bigger than Delaware, Rhode Island, Washington, D.C. combined. We have 5 national parks in the state of Utah. You could take all 5 of the national parks, combine them, and they'd still fit in this Bears Ears National Monument. The delegation, all 6 of us, wrote a letter to President Obama in April asking for a meeting with the president. He refused to meet with us on this issue. All the way through, we got less than 1 hour's notice that he was creating this national monument. Every single elected official at every level of government, other than the president, is opposed to this monument. Rebecca Benally, a Democrat from the Navajo Nation on the county commission in San Juan County, was opposed to this. The county commission is opposed to it. The state legislature was opposed to it. And both the House and the Senate, they sent a resolution to it. The entire delegation is opposed to it. The governor is opposed to it, and yet it still happened. And so we're asking that the committee seriously consider making sure that no funding for the Bears Ears Monument move forward. And finally, Mr. Chairman, with nearly 1,900 counties across 49 states face the expiration of a critical financial offsets for tax-exempt federal lands under their jurisdiction. Still recovering from the recent economic downturn, these counties depend very, very heavily on PILT payments, the payment in lieu of taxes to keep their communities afloat. PILT dollars allow local governments to provide critical health, education, culture, and emergency services. Particularly in my congressional district, where we have 2 national parks, lots of BLM land. We have the San Juan County that I've referred to a couple times. More than 90% is owned by state and federal government. Yet they have to do all the emergency services and plus the education budget. So we have some of the highest property tax rates in the entire state are in some of the most rural areas because there's so much federal land. And so we ask that the PILT payment be fully funded. The issues come up, and Mr. Calvert in particular, the chairman here, has been very helpful on this, but we do need your help in making sure that these funds are there, and they primarily go to education, and then they go on to emergency services. Those are the primary use of these funds, and we need them. And with that, I yield back. Thanks for the time.
Thank you, Jason. By the way, I've been on those roads. Tom and I were on those roads just recently, about a year ago, and we're still have kidney problems because of the washborne effect of it. That was in the summer months. God knows what they're like in the wintertime. So we appreciate your coming by and look forward to working with you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Okay, next on our agenda, we have Bruce Westerman and Brian Higgins, who would please come up. Okay. We'll have Bruce first here. Okay. Bruce Westerman from the great state of Arkansas, and love to hear from you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate this opportunity to testify before you today. And I'm here to address the urgent need for greater funding for our forest management programs and on-the-ground scientific research. I've said this a lot, but there are no negatives to a healthy forest system. And healthy forests, they provide clean air, clean water. They sequester carbon at greater rates, promote recreational opportunities, and increase biodiversity. They also produce a steady supply to our nation's forest products industry, which employs 2.8 million people nationwide, along with an annual payroll of $87 billion. And that accounts for 5.7% of total U.S. manufacturing. Unfortunately, the Forest Service has moved away from its original mission of managing our national forest system in a scientifically sound manner for multiple purpose uses. And that includes a dramatic decrease in timber harvesting. Last year, the Forest Service sold a mere 3 billion board feet of timber, and that's about a quarter of the amount that was sold 30 years ago. The result of this shift in focus is clear. Drought and overcrowding leave the forest susceptible to insect and disease infestation and make them more vulnerable to catastrophic wildfires. These fires destroy wildlife habitat, they radically alter ecosystems, decrease carbon storage, and force taxpayers to pay hundreds of millions of dollars annually in increased fire suppression costs. Therefore, it's time for the Forest Service to return to its core mission and place a greater emphasis on multiple use and scientific management, which includes more timber harvesting, mechanical thinning, and prescribed burns. Our current management system is not working for the forest, wildlife, the recreation community, or the taxpayer. It's time for a new approach, and the subcommittee can play a key role in this new approach. The Forest Service must work hand in glove with scientists and industry to promote forest health through more timber harvesting, prescribed burns, and other sound management techniques. I urge the subcommittee to include robust funding for the forest products line item under the National Forest System. This will help the Forest Service to refocus on its core mission and improve landscape health. In addition to promoting better forest management and timber harvesting, I ask the subcommittee to fully fund the Forest Inventory Analysis Program. FIA is designed to complete analysis of sample forest landscapes around the United States every 5 years. This is the data that's used to determine how much timber we have and where it's being used and the age of it. However, the Forest Service often finds itself on a 6 or 7 year rotation, leading to delayed analysis of our landscapes. This can force states to increase their matching contributions in order to have sound, timely scientific analysis for statewide forest management plans. FIA takes proactive, positive steps in the area of better forest management. FIA leads to scientific forest management practices that increase carbon storage and reduce the threat of wildfire. Additional funding to FIA will also give the wood products and timber industries certainty in making business decisions and assist in making ecologically sound forest management choices that benefit the environment and industry simultaneously. I additionally request robust funding for the Forest Products Laboratory. The Forest Products Laboratory conducts scientific research into wood products, forest biomass, the use of wood in tall buildings, and threats to various species such as white nose syndrome, which is decimating northern long-eared bat populations nationwide. This research is integral not only to science and conservation, but also for promoting millions of rural jobs, where an individual can find good-paying work, oftentimes without the need for a 4-year college degree. Once again, I would like to thank you, Chairman and the members of the committee, for the invitation to speak today, and I ask you to ensure strong, robust funding for the forest products line item under the National Forest System that promotes scientific research on our nation's forests through the Forest Inventory Analysis Program and the promotion of new and improved wood products supporting a sound forest products industry through the Forest Products Laboratory. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Bruce, for your testimony. We appreciate that. We're
Mr. Chairman?
very supportive of that industry. Yes.
Thank you,
Ms.
Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask, I know Mr. Westerman's deep interest in forestry, and I just wanted to ask him if you could give us a 1-minute summary of what you think is happening to, for example, our eastern forests with the increasing deer population and what's happening to our saplings. Could you kind of give us just your bird's eye view of what's happening across the country with forests?
The 1-minute version of what's happening across the country, and you're asking a forester who likes to talk in detail about this, but yeah, the issue you're talking about, Ms. Capter, is what we call regeneration or growing new trees. And in our eastern forest, you can have problems if you've got too many deer eating the young saplings that come up from the acorns. You can have a hard time getting regeneration, but the goal of forestry is to grow new trees. And that requires different management schemes, whether you're in the northeast, the southeast, the intermountain area, out on the coastal area, or in Alaska. But our forest managers need to be able to apply the science to manage and to keep these forests healthy, whether it's hardwoods in the east or conifers in the west. I hope that's close to explaining it in a minute.
Are our forests healthy?
Our private forests are very healthy because they've been managed. Our national forests, sadly, are not healthy, and the effect we see are the increasing wildfires. If you look at the graph of wildfires and expenditures on wildfires, they've gone up exponentially. So an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And if we'll manage these forests and spend some money to do that properly, then we'll save a lot of money on the back end. Plus, we'll have a better environment and healthier forest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony. Next, Mr. Brian Higgins from the great state of New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it very much. I just wanted to urge the subcommittee to consider the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. I live in Buffalo. I represent Buffalo. And prior to the Clean Water, Clean Air Act of 1972, chemical, steel, and grain industry essentially dumped their toxic poison into places like the Great Lakes and the Buffalo River. Because of the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative over the last 10 years, we have removed 67,000 semi-truckloads of toxic waste from the bottom of the Buffalo River. In 1969, the Environmental Protection Agency, 1970, the Environmental Protection Agency said or declared the Buffalo River was biologically dead and ecologically destroyed. With this funding from the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, that cleanup, EPA officials are now saying that the Buffalo River will be swimmable in the next 12 months, and the fish that are caught there safe for human consumption in the next 5 years. It's a dramatic turnaround, but it's also resulted in unleashing the resources and creativity of the private sector, which have invested a lot of money for the restoration of habitat along the river and also residential commercial mixed-use development in those corridors. So it's really created a new economy in Buffalo, and it's a very, very important program. So we appreciate very much the continuation of that. I used to be a teacher of history and economics at Buffalo State College, and I taught the history of Buffalo and Western New York. 100 years ago, Buffalo was the 8th largest economy in the entire nation, among the strongest in the entire world. All the great landscape and building architects, none of them were from Buffalo. They came to Buffalo. Henry Hobson Richardson, Louis Sullivan, Louise Bethune, the first female architect. Consequently, we had these beautiful buildings, but because of economic decline over the last 20 years, Buffalo took a major hit, and a lot of those buildings were empty. Because of the historic tax credit program, developers undertook the redevelopment of those buildings for commercial mixed use and residential development. Now we're seeing Buffalo go through a major economic renaissance. For example, the fastest growing neighborhood in all of Western New York is downtown Buffalo. And it's primarily young people that are filling in these old historic buildings that have been converted to apartments and condominiums and the like. But it's fundamentally changing the economy of Buffalo and Western New York. So my only message to the committee would be that without this tax credit, developers wouldn't have the wherewithal or the confidence to undertake these important restorations. So we're really losing nothing, because by giving these developers a tax credit, we're not giving up any money, overtly, but we are giving them the incentive, the financial incentive to fill in that all-important gap financing. And then finally, the National Endowment for the Arts and National Endowment for the Humanities. It's less than 0.1% of the federal budget. I know it's symbolic for a lot of people, but it does do a lot of good things in a lot of great communities like my community in Buffalo and Western New York. So I would just ask the committee respectfully to look at those areas and give them your every consideration and support. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian. I just want to comment on the Great Lakes. There's a lot of members on this committee that represent Great Lakes, so I suspect we'll continue to do that.
Great.
Three. That's right. Thank you. Thank you, Brian.
Very powerful bipartisan.
Yeah. Incentive here, yeah. Okay. Francis, Mr. Rooney, representing the great state of Florida and the great Everglades. You're recognized.
I'd like to thank you, Chairman Calvert, for letting me speak today, and members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the opportunity.
Press that button down there, Francis. Okay.
Okay. Oh, I turned it off. Okay. Well, thank you, Chairman Calvert, and members of the subcommittee for allowing me to speak today. The Everglades and Lake Okeechobee watershed includes 16 counties and 164 cities and a $2 trillion economic impact on the state of Florida. They support 55%, that's $1.3 trillion, of the real estate value in all of the state. For every dollar invested in the Everglades Lake Okeechobee watershed restorations, $4 of economic benefit will be produced. Due to a century of human development, the greater Everglades ecosystem is now less than one-half of its original size. The other half's Fort Lauderdale and Miami now. And Lake Okeechobee fills up 6 times as fast as it can drain, which results in massive discharges into adjacent rivers and coastal areas. The discharges are untreated, and we've had many years of good dairy farms and all kinds of things that make it that way. It's not just urban development. And so the impact of the freshwater, saltwater balance is another factor as well. The Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, or SERP, seeks to restore the balance in these ecosystems and reduce the harmful discharges into both the Caloosahatchee to the west and the St. Lucie to the east, and sending cleaner water down into Florida Bay. The SERP was created by Congress in the state of Florida in 2000, almost 17 years ago. It includes 68 projects which are designed to store, treat, and move water southward into the marshes of the Everglades and then into Florida Bay, to store and treat water entering Lake Okeechobee from the north, and to balance the flows of fresh and salt water to control salinity. The SERP was set up to share costs between the state and the feds 50-50, and so far the state has contributed $2.2 billion and the federal government $1.26 billion. So the state, instead of a 50-50 ratio, the state's a little over 63% at this point. While the bulk of the Everglades restoration funding goes to the Army Corps of Engineers for the construction and maintenance projects, there's a significant Department of Interior role. The Department of Interior provides restoration programs under the SERP, and it has important jurisdiction throughout the national parks with the Fish and Wildlife Service, the National Park Service that has Big Cypress, and the Everglades National Park, the U.S. Geological Survey, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs, because we've got the Miccosukis down there. Through these agencies, the Department of Interior supports updates to the SERP's programmatic regulations, creation of the guidance documents for how the projects will be built, operated, and evaluated, and establishing the goals to track the restoration progress and provide regular status reports to Congress. This all dovetails with the Corps. I mean, the Corps wouldn't be moving if you all don't move too. And so while it's not possible to directly support these programs through the appropriations process, I hope that the Interior, Environment, and Related Agencies Subcommittee would consider supporting appropriate levels of funding to the Department of Interior, especially for the Park Service, Fish and Wildlife, Geological Survey, and the BIA, so they continue to do their part to work with the Corps to move the Everglades restoration forward. There's a chart in the testimony that shows that while the Interior Department funding for the SERP has been fairly steady at around $8 million a year, the non-SERP funding has varied widely from as low as 56 or 53 to a high of 91, and last year was 56. So we're asking the Corps for more money, and we're asking you for more money to try to move forward to get some of these, some $7 billion of authorized projects that are underway. No, $9 billion of authorized projects, $7 billion incomplete, that are all underway and being completed. So we're just going to keep the ball moving down the field with your help. Thank you very much, Chairman Calvert.
Well, thank you, and I believe that we're going to be heading down that direction soon. I hope we
I
can.
think with your time, we're ready to go. We're looking forward to
We're trying
hosting
to
you in
work that
Southwest
out.
Florida.
Look forward to getting down there. I want to go out and go after some snakes down there too. I know they're causing great damage. Any other questions?
I'm just overwhelmed at the challenges of the Everglades. From living there, do you think we're making progress? We're slow on the uptake here, but what's your sense, Congressman?
We are. I'm a practical guy. I'm from the business. Every project helps some. Every rock thrown in the pond fills the pond up just a little bit. And some of the people down there say, "Oh, if we don't get $20 billion, forget the whole thing." That's irrational. Everything we can complete of these projects will help move the ball forward. And some of them deal with the fresh salt water thing, C-43, C-44. Some of them deal with water going south, which is these flow equalization basins that we're going to go look at, which is the next big funding project that moves the water down into the Everglades. And the marshes, God will clean it for us. The marshes will clean the water if we get the right amount of water going slow enough at the right depth that the marshes can do their job. Then we will have clean water in the Everglades, and we will have enough fresh water to fight back the incursion of the salt water that's killing the mangroves. And if we lose the mangroves in Florida Bay, we really do have a serious problem. That's like South Louisiana's problem.
Great. Well, thank you very much. We
you, sir.
appreciate your testimony. We're going to recess for votes and then come back immediately after the votes.
At least I'll know I'll be able to find the votes now and go with you guys.
Yeah, I am. I just want to say hi.
Okay, Ms. Rotawagan and Mr. Thompson, please come on up. I'd like to call the hearing on the Interior Environment meeting in order. Thank you for coming. We appreciate it. First, I'd like to recognize Ms. Rodaman. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. Rotawagan. So you're recognized for 5 minutes. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Chairman Calvert, Ranking Member McCollum. I appreciate you allowing me to testify before the subcommittee today. As the committee knows, the world has changed much since 1974. That's the furthest back we could find records on the program account to assist American Samoa government operations. The Insular Affairs American Samoa Government Operations account. Since then, the local population has grown, the infrastructure has become dated and in disrepair, and outside influences, particularly China, have begun to make inroads into the region with the development of a port in neighboring independent Samoa and future plans for a naval base in the same area. At the same time, recent federal measures have severely threatened the main economic driver on the island, which is the local tuna fishing industry. From the federal mandate to increase the minimum wage on the island, irresponsibly putting American Samoa on the same economic playing field as the United States, to closing off of large swaths of the ocean, which our people have fished for over a millennium, to the disproportionate regulations imposed on U.S. fishing vessels that are not imposed upon foreign vessels in the same waters. It's a wonder that only one of the canneries has decided to close its doors so far. As it stands, the amount awarded in the first year of record, 1974, for this account was $13 million. It is now 42 years later, and that amount has increased to only $22 million annually. To give you an idea of just how thin this funding is currently being stretched, ASG operations funded under this program are strictly limited to basic Department of Education operations, LBJ Tropical Medical Center operations, American Samoa Community College operations, and High Court operations. The hospital, which is the only one in the territory, is in such disrepair due to lack of funding that the VA will not allow our veterans on island to receive care there, and instead must fly them to Hawaii and foot the bill for their boarding while there for medical treatment due to the limited number of flights to and from American Samoa each week. If adjusted for inflation, the current amount would be $64 million annually. The good that this increase would do cannot be overstated and would be utilized to improve the conditions at the only hospital on the island, as well as other needed improvements to those entities I just listed. I respectfully request that the committee increase the requested funding level of $22 million to $64 million, an increase of $42 million to address the many funding shortfalls currently affecting American Samoa government operations. While I understand that this is a dramatic one-year increase, it would simply rectify the long overdue adjustment for inflation and allow for much-needed maintenance and upgrades to existing facilities. Also, to give you an idea of just how disproportionate the funding is, not only between American Samoa and the states, but the other territories as well. Just last week, the Department of the Interior sent an adjustment to the U.S. Virgin Islands in the amount of $18.2 million for their rum excise taxes for fiscal year 2016, bringing their total excise tax revenues to $231.5 million for the year. It is of note that the U.S. Virgin Islands population is only double that of American Samoa, yet their excise tax benefits are currently 10.5 times that of my home district. As a fallback, Guam has Section 30 funds, and with the military buildup, money will increase substantially. Now, I point this out not to do any disservice to the funding level of the other territories, as I know they need all they receive, but to simply point out just how underfunded American Samoa has been. Please know that I am happy to answer any questions you may have and look forward to working with you both to ensure that the good people of American Samoa are afforded the same opportunities and resources as their counterparts. I want to thank you again for your time and consideration of my request. While not a very large amount in the grand scheme of things, this increase would do so much good for the people of American Samoa. Fa'afetai te lava, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Ms. Wagon. I've been to American Samoa. It's a beautiful place, and I understand some of the challenges that you're having there. So we'll take your testimony very seriously and see what we can do within the confines of our budget. So,
Thank you, Mr.
thank
Chairman.
you. No other questions? Mr. Thompson, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Calvert, Ranking Member McCollum, thank you for holding this session today. As a member of the Natural Resources Committee and as Vice Chair of the Agriculture Committee, I appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony on funding and policy decisions made in this important subcommittee. And I'm going to do something someone from rural Pennsylvania would probably not too often. Last week I had the privilege of traveling with Mrs. Radawagan and Chairman Bishop to American Samoa, and I saw firsthand absolutely every one of the points that she addressed today in her testimony, and just offer my support, obviously, as well to her. By way of background, my district, which is many miles from that island, thousands of miles, in central Pennsylvania, makes up 24% of the landmass of Pennsylvania, and is among the most rural districts east of the Mississippi River. Agriculture, oil and gas production, manufacturing, mining, and timbering are among our top economic drivers throughout the region. The region is also home to the world's first commercial oil well, Drake's Well, in Titusville, Pennsylvania, and consequently the birth of the petroleum industry in 1859. Because of the storied history, the Oil Regional National Heritage Area, as recognized by the National Park Service, was established in 2004. With this in mind, I'd like to first express my great support for heritage areas. It is important that we continue to recognize the history of areas such as the oil region that directly helped to shape our nation as well as build our communities. It is also in this region of northwestern Pennsylvania that the Commonwealth's only national forest is located. 4 of my counties, Warren, Forest, Elk, and McKean, make up the Allegheny National Forest, where we long have had energy production, high-value timbering, and recreation that is second to none. As this subcommittee knows well, wildfires have skyrocketed in the past 2 decades, burning up $6.7 million acres per year on the average since the year 2000. In addition to the significant challenges of firefighting itself and those associated costs, national forests around the nation continue to have great difficulty performing essential activities due to budget cuts as a result of fire transfers. Accordingly, in the Allegheny, like most every national forest, we routinely lose funding, staff, and resources each year during the wildfire season. This directly diminishes the local Forest Service's ability to manage the ANF, allow for needed timbering, and pursue many other projects. Like many national forests in the West, the lack of timbering in the ANF directly undermines our local economy, as well as my 4 counties that lose out on funding for essential services. Now, we can do much more harvesting in the Allegheny National Forest, but that won't happen without the necessary funding or direction from Congress. And quite frankly, when it comes to timber or national forest, we literally can print money, because that high-value timber generates revenue if we're able to do that. In order to support management activities, and especially timbering in national forests, I request robust funding for the national forest system. I also urge full funding for the forest products and timber sales, capital improvement and maintenance, and forest roads. Further, I request that the committee include report language calling for the Forest Service to specifically meet each forest plan's harvesting levels. Forests are living and breathing ecosystems that need to be managed, and providing necessary funding for such management activities, including timbering, prescribed burns, and thinnings, is essential for forest health and in order to prevent wildfires. Regarding other management activities, the Forest Service is doing important work on invasive species, diseases, and forest health. And I've seen this firsthand at the Warren Research Lab located in my district. This work is fundamental in helping to not only deal with existing forest health programs, but also to get in front of the emergency ones before they exacerbate and become greater threats. With this in mind, I request much needed funding for Forest Service research activities, specifically for forest and rangeland research, as well as for the state and private forests. Similarly, we must provide necessary resources for the Fish and Wildlife Service's state and tribal wildlife grants for the purpose of insect, disease, and invasive plant research. This program directly supports grants to the states for species conservation in order to help prevent listings under the Endangered Species Act. And finally, I'd like to register my great support for Payments in Lieu of Taxes program as well as Secure Rural Schools. Although currently expired, Secure Rural Schools has been a critical lifeline for national forest counties in providing essential services because of the greatly reduced timbering in the national forest since the early 1990s. With that, I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony to the committee, and I look forward to working with you as the appropriation process continues to move forward in the fiscal year 2018. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Thompson, for your testimony. We'll take all this into account. Any questions? Seeing none, next, Ms. Sewell from the great state of Alabama. And Mr. Lamoffa, you may come over here and take a seat also. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman and Ranking Member. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify today. First, I want to thank this subcommittee for working with me in the past and for your demonstrated commitment to historic preservation. As you begin to consider the FY18 Interior Appropriations Bill, I ask that you continue to strongly support historic preservation funds and the National Park Service construction account. Specifically, I am requesting an increase from $78.4 million to $87.4 million in the Historic Preservation Fund, including $25 million for the Civil Rights Competitive Grants to preserve, document, and interpret the sites and stories of the Civil Rights Movement and the African American experience. I'm also requesting that once again, we provide $3 million to be included for competitive grants for historically black colleges to document sites and stories associated with the Civil Rights Movement. Furthermore, I'm requesting that the National Park Service construction account be funded to $252 million from $215 million in last year's budget. These dollars fund construction projects, equipment replacement, management planning, and special projects. Under the construction fund, I'm asking that $4.3 million support the Civil Rights Initiative by completing high-priority facility projects at the National Park Service sites related to the Civil Rights Movement and the African American experience. My district, as many of you know, is the 7th Congressional District of Alabama, known often as a Civil Rights District. It includes Birmingham, Selma, my hometown, and Montgomery. Many historic events took place there, from the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church to the Children's March to the Montgomery bus boycott to Bloody Sunday in Selma. Some of you may have even taken the trip with John Lewis through my district. These stories are of national and international significance, and we are fortunate that the National Park Service is preserving and interpreting these stories. In my district, we have the Selma to Montgomery National Historic Trail, as well as the new Birmingham National Historic Monument. I am so excited that the Park Service has a strong presence in my district, and I know firsthand how seriously they take their mission as the nation's storytellers and preservers of historic sites. The National Park Service not only preserves the sites and stories of our great American history, but they also provide very important economic revitalizations and jobs to those communities. In my hometown of Selma, the National Park Service Selma Interpretive Center brings tourism dollars to a very rural Black Belt community. In Birmingham, the Civil Rights Monument is providing a critical role in the downtown revitalization of that city. In fact, it is said that for every dollar invested in the national parks, $10 is generated in national economic activity for those communities. I can testify that this is truly the case. National parks also support more than 250,000 private sector jobs, according to the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Moreover, the American people overwhelmingly support the National Park Service and their missions. According to the National Parks Conservation Association, 95% of voters support National Park Service, and more than 80% have visited a national park in their lifetime. However, the National Park Service has faced deep budgetary restraints in recent years. Their deferred maintenance project list continues to grow, and they have been limited in their ability to protect new sites that would more fully tell America's story. That is why I am asking that the National Park Service construction account be increased to $250 million in order to complete pending projects and expand National Park Service presence in more communities across America. Also, as I've mentioned before, we must ensure that the Historic Preservation Fund is strengthened. The foot soldiers of the Civil Rights Movement are aging and must document their stories before they are lost. And who better to document those stories than the students from historically black colleges? That is why I'm requesting once again that we fund that count by $3 million. These students are the beneficiaries of the Civil Rights Movement, and they have the opportunity to not only preserve history, but to be inspired by brave Americans that risked their lives in the pursuit of social justice and equality. I'm requesting that $3 million is included for competitive grants to historically black colleges to document the sites and stories associated with the Civil Rights Movement. The funding that I'm requesting is an investment not only in historic preservation, but also an investment in economic redevelopment of many of the communities across America. We all have history in our districts, and it's important to preserve it. Thank you for listening to my testimony, and I hope that you will strongly consider my requests. I look forward to working with you as we preserve our natural resources, we preserve the National Park Service, and historic preservation for all Americans to come. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Condi Rice is from your district.
Birmingham, absolutely.
That's right. Well, thank you for your testimony.
Well, I thank you, and this committee has been very gracious to work with my office in the past, and I hope that you'll work with us on historic preservation once again. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Lamoffa from the greatest state in the Union, California.
Okay, I thought he was from Idaho for a minute. No, I said I thought he was from Idaho for a minute when he said that.
Wow, not going to admit that one. I was just going to say the greatest district, but I appreciate the time, Mr. Chairman, committee members, ranking member. Thank you. Just in general here, allowing me to testify today on the long issue of forestry-related problems, which I have so much in my district and we share so much in common. I'm just asking the committee to act this year in really three key areas. Biomass, and encouragement of the usage of that for creating energy. Streamlining the post-fire restoration issues we face so much, especially in Northern California. Other states, I understand, have a little easier go of it post-fire. And also addressing the vicious cycle of diverting forest management funding to fire suppression. As we've seen, what it used to be 1/3 for suppression for Forest Service has now gone to 2/3, with 1/3 left to do other work. We have at risk, catastrophic risk, over 82 million acres in this country. Since 2001, forests in California have been burned by wildfires at an average rate of about 320,000 acres per year. We have bark beetle infestations and other disease problems that have impacted a total of 4 million acres, or nearly 25% of national forests. With so much land already negatively impacted by wildfires, streamlining the post-fire salvage process should be a key priority. That timber still has value within a short window of time, which can go towards the cost of helping to reforest an area, which needs to be done. Erosion is a problem. Erosion getting in our waterways, our lakes, everything is a giant concern across the board from so many points on the spectrum. Post-fire restoration costs can reach $2,000 an acre, but ensuring that rapid salvage efforts preserve this timberland can offset those costs by generating revenue and then the damage that can come from an erosive habitat. To help speed post-fire restoration efforts, the committee should include report language directing the Forest Service to utilize existing categorical exclusions to the greatest extent possible, streamlining the process, particularly when considering this post-fire salvage and restoration effort. We know bark beetles have the ability to kill a host tree in a matter of just a few weeks, and the period in which trees may be processed into useful timber, as I mentioned, can be just as few as a few short months. If dead trees preferably were not processed in that period, they still may be used as fuel for biomass energy production. Biomass plants can be an effective and efficient way to help rid the forest of salvage and hazardous fuel, generating electricity and creating local jobs in an economy that's been very damaged in recent decades in rural part of forested America. Yet the remote locations of many impacted forests can create cost challenges to getting this biomass to a plant. To help address the buildup of dead trees caused by drought and disease, the subcommittee should prepare report language directing the Forest Service to prioritize use of $15 million in biomass support funds that exists for projects that expedite the removal of dead trees from areas designated as high fire hazard areas. I also believe, as do many of my Western colleagues, I'll count Mr. G.T. Thompson as one of my Western colleagues, that the subcommittee should consider including language similar to that of my colleague, Mr. Simpson, is H.R. 167 from the previous session that would make large forest fires eligible for federal disaster funding in the way that hurricanes, earthquakes, and other large disasters are already. The Stafford Act set guidelines for engaging in post-disaster emergency activities. The Act fails to recognize fires as major disasters eligible for federal assistance, exempt from the NEPA process. Such changes would provide the Forest Service with the means to engage in restoration and reforestation work immediately, leading to an increase in overall forest health and resiliency. A common theme contributing to the decline of forest health is frivolous lawsuits filed by extremist groups intended solely in order to delay projects until they no longer become feasible, which is made possible by a loophole that allows payment of drastically higher attorney fees for ESA lawsuits than for other suits against the federal government. This helped delay in my own district a fire from 2015 that took a year and a half to be sorted out instead of salvaging within 6 months. A year and a half later, so they finally put out to bid a tiny area of that forest. Representative Huizenga sponsored a measure addressing this issue on these lawsuits, and it was passed by the Committee on Natural Resources. He and Rep. Flores and I sponsored an amendment on the issue that last session. To end these lawsuits, to end the practice of some groups, using this as a business plan, as a moneymaker, the subcommittee should include language aligning attorney fees in ESA lawsuits to the $125 per hour cap applied to all other suits against the federal government. So, Mr. Chairman, with these investments and these reforms, we can begin to engage in a much more effective forest management plan that favors a more practical approach, will improve forest health, protect rural communities, protect our air, protect firefighters, and generate revenue for the federal and local governments with jobs for those people that have been so devastated by their economy being taken away. With that, I thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Lamoffer, for your testimony. I'm sure Mr. Simpson shares your hopes that we can get the wildfire bill passed in this Congress. Every member of the committee, both Republican and Democrat, are signed on to Mr. Simpson's bill. We're hopeful we'll have a better shot this year than we did last year. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, Mr. Morgan Griffith from Virginia, right next door.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Let me talk about my district first, and then I'll talk more globally. First, I heard Mr. Thompson say something about PILT that was affirmative, and even though you usually hear that coming from western states, mine too is a district that receives PILT, having one of my counties being 50% owned by National Forest and another that's about 39%. So it is for some of the eastern districts in the mountains, it is important as well. Let's talk about the mountains in my district where we have historically produced coal. We've had some problems. Mr. Chairman has been very helpful over the last couple of years. The Power Plus program is a great program. As you'll recall, you helped me. We tried to finagle a way to help the Commonwealth of Virginia because we're in the second tranche. The first tranche is West Virginia, Kentucky, and Pennsylvania. They've gotten the lion's share of the money. Don't have any problem with them getting a big chunk. But I border West Virginia and Kentucky. The people who mine coal in Kentucky and West Virginia sometimes live in my district, and the people who mine coal in my district sometimes live in West Virginia and Kentucky. We're all the same culture in that end of the district, and we need some help. So you've helped me in the past. I appreciate that. If we can somehow, not necessarily thinking the second tranche ought to be equal, but substantial, that would be a big help to the people in my district because I've got counties that don't have any land that they can convert to a new, as people say they want coal to convert or to change those jobs into something else. When you don't have anything but a 2-lane road and you've only got 2 flat pieces of land in one of my counties where they then condemned 1 flat piece of land to get the high school out of the floodway, where the cafeteria used to flood about every 3rd year, it makes it tough. One of the things we can do is the Power Plus, where we can then reclaim that abandoned mine land and convert it for some economic use as well, which would be of great benefit to the people. So I ask for your help on that. Now, going global, EPA. And I think this is one that, you know, you take off the regular thought processes. I think that we need to move some of the workforce out of Washington, D.C., but that doesn't mean taking the folks that are in Washington, D.C. who have been writing regulations and move them to some other part of the country to write regulations. I think we saw with Flint, Michigan, that what you've got to do is we need more people out there like the EPA worker who blew the whistle and said, hey, something's going on here, offered with his own money to do the testing. Now, in that case, we had a rogue EPA person. I'm not blaming the whole EPA for that, but a rogue person who said, yeah, cover that up. And that person then immediately retired when it all became public. But it was a constituent of mine from Virginia Tech who came forward and said, we're going to go out there, we're going to take our resources in Virginia and spend them on Flint, Michigan. And it was that professor at Virginia Tech who actually uncovered the whole lead problem. I think we need more people in the field working on projects where we have clean water to make sure we don't have lead coming in. That's the EPA's core purpose. When they do their core purpose, they're very good at it. When they start trying to put industries out of business, that's not their field. They don't always understand what they're doing. They've even told us in the past, although the court has since said the Supreme Court has since said you got a different measure. They've said it's not our job to figure out how many jobs are going to be lost or how much it costs. We do a rough estimate, but it's not really our job. They should do that. But I know of places in my district that could use some clean water that doesn't have it. I know people that need sewage treatment help. And instead of trying to punish folks, if we could move some of those people that are currently in Washington doing desk jobs into the field and have them looking at trying to help us in the poorer regions of the country, figure out how we're going to get the clean water from point A to point B and how we're going to deal with sewage treatment in areas that are poor. It's interesting, we don't always qualify, watch my time here, we don't always qualify in some areas of my district because the people who've made good money in the coal industry build nice big houses and they have those septic systems that take care of their problem. Their next door neighbors don't have that advantage, the folks who aren't quite as well off financially. But they don't, unlike most parts of the country, they don't live a long way away from each other. So in the census block, we don't measure up as poor enough to get help on things like sewage treatment because you got the rich folks living just a stone's throw away from the not so rich folks, the people who can't afford it, and it skews all the numbers for the census block. So I don't know how you help with that, but one of my thoughts is, I don't know how you change the formula. I don't have a magic bullet on that. But if somehow we could figure out a way that we get more people who their job is to help us figure out in the field how we're going to deal with getting clean water to the back hollers and how we're going to deal with sewage treatment where we don't have a sewage treatment plant. And literally, I know of a spot in my district where it's rolling down the side of a hill and they've taken measures to put bolts and all kinds of things in the rain runoff section of the road so that they can hope by the time it gets to the bottom of the mountain, it's not nearly as dirty as it was when it left their toilet. With that, I yield.
Well, I appreciate your testimony. I know there's been discussion about using zip codes instead of using economic zones, and I think that's something that these agencies should, with today's technology, should be considered. So,
And you can help me on Power Plus, I really would appreciate it, but you have in the past.
And we're very aware of the program and how much helpful it has been in the Appalachia country, so we'll continue to look at that. Thank you so much for your testimony.
Appreciate y'all's time.
Okay. Thank you. Next, Sheila, okay, Sheila Jackson and Mr. Cleaver, okay? Okay, I think, Mr. Cleaver, you were here first, I think, so that's all right?
I'm on the list
All
for
right,
being,
fine.
yeah.
No problem.
Just as Cleaver doesn't mind, I'm in the markup.
Okay.
Cleaver, I'll be very brief.
All right.
As brief as I can be.
You're
Thank you.
recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much to Chairman and Ranking Member, to the courtesies of Mr. Cleaver. Let me thank you to the members of this committee. As we reflect on the backdrop of a potential $54 billion ramp-up to military spending and the prospective cuts in discretionary spending, let me be counted as an advocate for the work that this committee does and for the important funding that you oversee and speak to it as quickly as possible. Let me support initially the overall work that you do, but particularly the safe drinking water, clean air, and land environmental justice. That is a critical part in helping communities maintain safe and effective water infrastructure. I happen to be from an urban city, but we are constantly dealing with the question of water and water development in the city of Houston. I also want to add my support for the $15 million for land and water conservation, for the Outdoor Recreation Legacy Partnership that complements the traditional formula of state conservation grants, and in particular, a priority given to projects that engage and empower underserved communities and youth and provide opportunities for employment and job training. I also want to add, and I have a whole list of which I ask unanimous consent that my whole statement be submitted into the record, and I'm going to speak to specific issues. I also want to acknowledge support for $87 billion for the, 87 for the Historic Preservation Fund, provides funding for the core historic preservation programs. Support for the National Endowment for the Arts, funding for the NEA maintains is extremely important programs, and particularly Blue Star Museums, Operation Homecoming, and others. I add my support, among others, for the HBCU Historic Preservation Program. The National Trust for Historic Preservation was designated the HBCUs among the nation's most endangered sites, and this was done in 1998. And we've tried to continue to fund those historic sites, and I would ask that those dollars be continued, along with the monies for the historic preservation of Japanese American confinement sites. And then I want to spend a little time on the Endangered Species Conservation Fund. The CESCF provides vital funding to regional habitat conservation through competitive grants. And I believe the importance of protecting the endangered species is an important responsibility of your work. And I would encourage and support that work. I support the monies for the National Endowment for the Humanities. NEH is the single most important source of federal support for the humanities and the investment, I call it critical learning and U.S. interest, by focusing on a workforce that should be enhanced with the knowledge that will make them a global workforce, but also a culturally exposed workforce. I want to conclude my remarks by speaking to the dollars that I support for the National Heritage Partnership Program. The 49 National Heritage areas across the country preserve and revitalize cultural, historic, and natural resources, delivering recreational and educational opportunities to visitors, residents, and entire regions. Through innovative public-private partnerships, natural heritage areas have effectively leveraged federal resources, attracting an average of $5.50 of private funding. That's an important statement, that when we have these heritage areas, we draw the private sector and private involvement. Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, as I said, there are 49 sites, and there are none in the state of Texas. We hope to rectify this in the not-too-distant future. Texas is the largest and second most populous state in the nation and has a unique story in American history with its diverse geographic landscape, natural resources, and population. From Galveston's port, East Texas farms and forestry, and the Buffalo Soldiers, Texas has a rich multicultural heritage and history. And one of those stories to be told is the trail from the point of the Emancipation Proclamation delivered by Captain Granger in Galveston, all through Galveston and counties beyond, through Emancipation Park in Houston, Texas, which was built by slaves. So, as I said, there are many sites to be honored and respected, and the $9 billion that has been set aside for the National Heritage Partnership Programs, I hope will be strongly supported. I ask all of you, as you proceed, to look at some of the issues that we have emphasized to be able to help America's good health as it relates to its interior, its environment, its water, continue to be successful.
Thank the gentlelady for her testimony. Any questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Mr. Cleaver, appreciate your coming in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, and Ranking Member Collin, for this opportunity to speak with you. I want to especially thank both you, Mr. McCollum, and Mr. Simpson. I'm sorry, and Mr. Simpson for allowing graciously the colloquy on the floor with me last year when I came to express support for the World War I Commission. I would like to request the committee's support in providing funding in fiscal year 2017 and 2018 for the United States World War I Centennial Commission to carry out the duties and obligations that we in Congress gave them. As you know, April 6th is the 100th anniversary of the United States entry into World War I. Over 4.7 million men and women served our nation in uniform, and over 116,000 Americans gave their lives. The U.S. World War I Centennial Commission is currently planning and implementing programs and events. You know what? Excuse me. Look, I'll save your time, and I'll thank you. If I can just stand up,
Sure.
Mr. Chairman.
No,
Look,
no problem.
all the nations that participated in World War I are trying desperately to put on a worthy commemoration. Unfortunately for us, their governments are sponsoring all of the events that will take place in Europe, and of course, there will be events taking place here in Washington and in Kansas City. So why did I get involved in a World War I commission? Judge Poe and I, for whatever reason, separate reasons, ended up pushing for a World War I memorial. There is no World War I memorial, National World War I memorial, in existence. At least there wasn't. There's a D.C. memorial that has fallen in deep repair. Money is being raised to build a memorial in Pershing Park here. The reason I became involved is that at the end of World War I, the people of Kansas City, kids gave dimes, pennies, and they built the most majestic World War I memorial any place. When I was mayor of the city, I came up because it had fallen in disrepair, offered it to the National Park Service. They respectfully declined. I went back. The taxpayers decided to vote it and to put a museum in it and rebuild it. And this is it today. 103,000 people turned out to greet the leaders of the Allied forces from World War I here in Kansas City, 100 without microphones, I might add, and including one veteran of the war, Harry Truman. And so they built it with money from little kids, and this is it today. I'm just desperately asking for consideration that we help fund this event that's significant for us. There are no World War I veterans left. I don't think we ought to allow this World War I commemoration centennial to go by without us participating significantly. So I'm just asking, we need help. I mean, I think it will be an embarrassment if we fail to commemorate World War I at the level that our European allies are doing. And people from here, including our president and members of the House and Senate, are going to be invited to Europe. We want to have something significant here. I hate to go over time, and I appreciate your time and need your help. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a very noble cause, and I think it's worth doing, so we'll take a very close look at it. Thank you very much for your testimony. Mr. Gozar, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to testify before the subcommittee. I'm Congressman Paul Gosar, and I represent Arizona's 4th Congressional District. I'm also the chairman of the Congressional Western Caucus, chairman of the House Committee on Natural Resources, Subcommittee on Energy and Mineral Resources, and the vice chairman of the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, Subcommittee on the Interior. Critical programs and oversight activities addressed by the Interior, Environment, and related agencies' appropriations bill fall under our purview, and I would like to take this opportunity to discuss several of those today. The most important program I would like to advocate today is for payment in lieu of taxes, the PILT program. It was first signed into law in October of 1976 and was created to compensate local governments for large quantities of untaxable federal lands within their jurisdiction. Local property and sales typically fund county governments, allowing them to provide essential services like law enforcement, infrastructure, educational needs. The inability for counties to collect local taxes on federal lands is particularly burdensome, especially when counties often provide critical services on these very lands. PILT funding helps offset the losses of these critical revenues and allows for the continuation of essential services. In the fiscal year 2015, the national average for PILT payments was 72.4 cents per acre. This figure is nowhere near the amount of revenue that would be generated if these lands were able to undergo economic development and value-based taxation. This disproportionately impacts rural areas where access to government resources is already more difficult than in larger cities. I'm a strong supporter of PILT and call on this body to provide full funding for PILT for the fiscal year 2017, fiscal year 2018, and beyond. The next program I'd like to advocate for deals with on-the-ground sage grouse conservation. The fiscal year 2015 House Interior and Environmental Appropriations Bill provided an increase of $12 million above the fiscal year 2016 level for these purposes. Sage grouse conservation and management is an issue best accomplished on the ground by states and local stakeholders. While Arizona does not have to deal with the sage grouse issues directly, this is an important issue that impacts Western Caucus members and communities throughout the West. The subcommittee should continue to provide funding for local conservation and management purposes. This subcommittee and the full Appropriations Committee should also work with Western members to defund the de facto sage grouse listing implemented by the Department of Interior through the Revenue Management Plan, Resources Management Plan, the RMP, and Land Resources Management Plan, or the LRMP amendments. These misguided amendments were not warranted and sought to prevent responsible mineral production and other activities across 11 states, including 67 million acres of land administered by the BLM and the Forest Service, and tens of millions of acres of federal mineral estate. The fiscal year 2017 Interior and Environmental Appropriations Bill included numerous prohibitions and riders that were important to Western communities, and I'd like to thank you for including these provisions. I would like to ask from the subcommittee to again retain the following provisions that were passed by the House in last fiscal year's bill. A rider prohibiting the Environmental Protection Agency's attempt to expand the Clean Water Act through the unlawful guidance. A provision allowing for responsible state management of the Mexican wolf populations. A rider blocking funds for the EPA to implement its Waters of the United States, or the WOTUS rule. A provision prohibiting funds from the social cost of carbon. A rider prohibiting the EPA from implementing new greenhouse gas regulations for new and existing power plants, and eliminating funds for the greenhouse gas new source performance standards. A prohibition on the EPA from imposing duplicative financial assurance requirements, and a prohibition for the regulation of the lead content of ammunition and fishing tackle. Unfortunately, the Obama administration also churned out numerous job-killing regulations since last fiscal year's bill was passed. We've been addressing many of those in the House CRAs. However, many of these rules need to be addressed through the fiscal year 2018 Interior, Environment, and Related Agencies Appropriation Bill. These include, but are not limited to, the BLM's venting and flaring rule, BLM's Planning 2.0 rule, the Office of Natural Resources Revenues revision of the Federal Mineral Production Valuation Rule, and numerous others. I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you. I would like to thank you all of the members for the subcommittee for your important work and hope this fiscal year's bill is as good as and as excellent legislation as passed out last year. The Western Caucus and the members of my subcommittee look forward to coordinating with you and building on that effort. Thanks again. I appreciate all your time.
Thank you. I just want to point out, as you know, PILT's fully funded
Yep.
in the 2017 appropriation bill. But long-term, we need the help from the authorizing committees to fix this problem.
I agree with
So,
you. Mr. Chairman,
Any help you can do on that, that would be very beneficial.
we will certainly
the whole
give whatever we
process.
can.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any questions? Oh, next, David Price from North Carolina, and Jimmy Panetta from the great state of California.
Long day.
It's not over yet. We appreciate you both coming in today. David, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
All right, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Madam Ranking Member, and colleagues. Glad to see all of you. Appreciate the chance to address the subcommittee regarding the importance of the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities. I'm co-chair of the Humanities Caucus in the House. That's a responsibility I share with Representative Leonard Lance, and I'm a member of the Congressional Arts Caucus. So in these capacities, I'm very happy to support the missions of these two agencies. The Humanities Caucus is bipartisan. We support the efforts and contributions of the National Endowment, an agency that has a broad impact on districts across the nation, both rural and urban. Since its inception, NEH grants have leveraged more than $4 billion in matching grants for the humanities. I mean, expenditures in both of these endowments have that leveraging feature. For example, In last year alone, federal NEH museum grants leveraged $33 million into an additional $104 million. Pretty good return for the American taxpayer. Further, every federal dollar state humanities councils give out in grants leverages $5 at the state and local level. So the work of the Humanities Endowment runs the gamut from very sophisticated projects of national importance, for example, the digitization of key material, making the humanities more accessible to all Americans, especially in rural areas. The electronic publication of Alexander Hamilton's Federalist Papers would be an example. To very local projects that very small grants that encourage local history and local access to culture and the heritage that in our states and communities. There are projects like the virtual gallery of Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. So it's not just the founding fathers, but it's a range of approaches to history, all of which promote understanding and excitement and interest. Reaches Americans in every walk of life. Grant allocations are small, but they do target unique projects that expand research and knowledge. Remains the most NEH, the most important source of federal funding for research and scholarship in history, literature, foreign language, and other fields, to provide us with a rich and dynamic ethical and cultural and historical perspective. I'll be more brief with the NEA, but I think it's equally important. It's a twin agency, helps us glimpse through the keyhole of history, discovering the social and economic and political environments of the past. The Arts Endowment's effectiveness is due in part to the program's robust system of partnerships. I think we've all experienced this with our local arts councils, our state arts agency. We come into contact with this with the Congressional Arts Competition, for example. These programs have a cultural impact. They also have a profound economic impact. The estimate I've seen, NEA helps support 4.5 million jobs, $698 billion in economic activity. So we need to protect and, if possible, enhance the work of these agencies. I know there are reports that we might do just the opposite, that there's some proposals from outside groups from think tanks to eliminate funding completely. I hope we can reject this misguided approach. I know as a senior member of this committee that we have a lot of difficult choices, but it seems to me this one should be fairly clear-cut. The NEA and the the facts are clear. These are modest expenditures, but millions of jobs, hundreds of millions in direct economic activity, and broad public benefit and support. So, to quote Thomas Campbell, director of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, eliminating the NEA would in essence eliminate investment by the American government in the curiosity and intelligence of its citizens. It's also important the way NEA and NEH grants signal private investors. They serve a kind of validation function in terms of standards that might justify investment, while at the same time admitting much diversity in the kinds of grants made. So instead of eliminating our government's modest support for these endowments, we should hold steadfast in our investment and understand that it is just that, an investment, where we're generating more than $4 billion in private funds for the humanities, for example. So I thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of these agencies. I urge you to look at the nationwide impact of these endowments and continue to provide support. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, David. As you know, there's always been bipartisan support for these programs. I suspect that'll be in the future, too. Mr. Panetta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate this opportunity to be here to testify in front of you. Ms. McCollum, Mr. Simpson, staff, thank you. I appreciate this chance to talk to you about investing in programs that preserve and protect something that I feel is important to all of us, and that's our natural resources. I represent the 20th Congressional District in California, the Central Coast of California, and I'll go so far as taking a chance to probably offend many of you, but I believe it's the most beautiful district in the United States. And I think you'll understand that sentiment
You'll understand that sentiment after my testimony, or at least have some empathy for why I would say that. Look, I admit I'm new to Congress, but I'm learning, and I'm learning a lot about the process and protocol. One thing I do realize is how important the Appropriation Committee's annual check on our nation's priorities is through the power of the purse. That's why I'm asking for the Appropriation Committee to focus on providing funding for 3 areas: the Land and Water Conservation Fund, the Bureau of Land Management, and the Wildlife Fire Management in the Forest Service. The Land and Water Conservation Fund is the only federal program for the conservation and promotion of national parks, forests, and Bureau of Land Management land. In my district on the Central Coast of California, federal grants have allowed the purchase of a number of land in holdings, such as the Los Padres National Forest, the Ventana Wilderness Area, the Pinnacles National Park, and the Elkhorn Slough National Wildlife Refuge. Those land holdings are stunning pieces of land, yet like anything, they need to be managed properly. Continued federal funding of those federal and state projects allows them to be managed effectively and efficiently. That is why I submit to you that $475 million in discretionary funding should be appropriated for the Land and Water Conservation Fund. When it comes to the Bureau of Land Management, there are 2 areas I want to focus on: the Bureau of Land Management Recreation Resources Management Account. That's important because it provides for the upkeep of BLM land and must have the necessary funding. In order to maintain safe and engaging experience for the vast areas of the BLM, I recommend appropriating $69.4 million this fiscal year. In regards to the BLM National Landscape Conservation System, in my congressional district, we have 2 national monuments: the California Coastal National Monument and the Fort Ord National Monument. The California Coastal National Monument spans 1,100 miles beyond, includes my district and then some, all along the California coast, 1,100 miles worth, and it's focused on the intertidal areas of the coast. The BLM's National Landscape Conservation System protects an estimated 200,000 breeding seabirds and thousands of marine mammals within this zone. The Fort Ord National Monument is 15,000 acres of dedicated open space. It used to serve as a military training ground for the brave men and women that served our nation from World War I all the way up to the Gulf War. Now that land attracts not just veterans, but scientists who are interested in the rich diversity of rare and unique species of plants that can only be found in that area. That area also attracts hikers, mountain bikers, bird watchers, and many of those who have trained and toiled on that land. It is a prime example of California's outdoor recreation, but also a recreation revenue. That area contributes to California's 700,000 jobs and $27 billion in wages and salaries from outdoor recreation. That is why I support the continued investment of $80 million for fiscal year 2018 for BLM National Landscape Conservation System. I believe that that is an investment that will not only help maintain the national monuments, but also the people who live, work, and experience those areas. Finally, I'd ask to invest in our nation's response to natural disasters, especially wildfires. Last summer in 2016, the Central Coast experienced the Soberanes fire near Big Sur. As you probably know, that was the most expensive fire in the history of this nation. It took thousands of firefighters many months to contain this expansive wildfire that consumed more than 130,000 acres and cost more than $200 million to fight. And that cost doesn't include the lost wages, the high cost of repairs, and the lost business revenue. We are still feeling the impact of that fire because the same area is now being torn apart again by massive flooding in our region that our region is experiencing. Without the vegetation to hold the soil in place, the ground shifts, and that's what causes mudslides, which not only destroy our roads and property, but it also traps and cuts off hundreds of people in certain communities. Right now, Big Sur is reeling because of all the landslides, including a bridge that's 316 feet long has actually been taken out and needs to be replaced. Therefore, I recommend that the Wildlife Fire Management and the Forest Service receive no less than $2.7 billion for both fighting wildfires, but also for anti-fire protections, such as land breaks during the non-fire season. I realize my testimony contained evidence about parks, monuments, and open space in my district on the Central Coast of California, but it's my home, and I'm proud of it. I grew up there, And I believe that because I was allowed to experience that, that's why I'm here in front of you. But I also believe it's why it's important to have for my daughters so that they can experience those areas and that they can go on to promote and talk about the national parks as I do. And so I hope that you consider advocate. I hope that you consider those investments, and that's why I advocate and respectfully ask for the funding of programs that are vital to the preservation and protection of our natural resources for all of our children and also our future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And you probably already are a signatory to Mr. Simpson's bill on wildfire. Everyone on this committee is, and so.
If not, you can sign up really easily.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Big Sur was not only the large, was a large fire, but we had the rim fire over by Yosemite. It cost us about $250 million to put that fire out. So we have, in California, very expensive fires. But
Exactly.
I really do enjoy your district, especially Pebble Beach. So it's a nice place.
I didn't mention that, but yeah,
Thank you.
understandable, sir.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I think Mike and I like our districts, too.
Yeah, we all love it.
Exactly.
Pebble Beach is kind of special.
Thank you.
That is a national treasure, that's for sure.
Understood.
Well, thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Alma Adams.
I'm doing well, thank you. Hope you are.
Well, thank you for coming today, and you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Chairman Calvert and Ranking Member McCollum, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify about the arts and humanities in our country.
Hold on, you're going to turn that mic on.
I'm
There you go.
sorry.
No
Let me
problem.
start over.
There you go. You got it.
You want me to start over? No?
No,
Oh,
go ahead. That's
okay.
fine.
As a representative of North Carolina's 12th Congressional District, as a member of the Art Caucus here, as a practicing professional artist and arts educator, as a curator and college art professor for over 40 years, I'm pleased to join my colleagues in expressing my support for funding for the National Endowment for the Arts, for the National Endowment for the Humanities, and for arts funding. The arts and humanities are critical for adding value to our shared culture. The arts are not just used to mark celebrations, but to change our perspectives of perceptions of society. The arts connect us to the past and present and convey our unique experiences and are presented in many forms. Museums function as tools to house and preserve our collective history as a nation and binds us together as one community. Visual artists reflect on our society and force us to reconcile our past, and writers record history and expose and challenge readers to different ideas presented in our society. And musicians transcend social and cultural boundaries to connect to the listener through the sound of their instruments. Time and time again, we've made a conscious decision to fund the arts, signaling that we are intrinsically value the arts as being crucial to our collective identity. The National Endowment for the Arts has been and continues to be necessary to the success of the arts in my home state of North Carolina. As a representative of Charlotte, one of the largest cities in the South, I understand how important the NEA is to our unique and thriving art culture. In 2016, the NEA invested $60,000 in grants in Charlotte for programs such as the Children's Theater of Charlotte, performance of The Journey to Oz, and the McCall Center for Art in an Innovations exhibition and residency featuring Latino and Hispanic artists. NEA grants make these cultural events possible. The nationally recognized Charlotte Ballet also depends on the NEA for grants, which has allowed this company to create and perform its own unique ballets. The arts not only provide entertainment, but they also encourage us to think critically. Advocates and researchers have shown that the arts have a positive impact on a young person's development. Because of this understanding, the arts and music were included in the Every Student Succeeds Act as part of a well-rounded education. The NEA is a critical component to ensuring strong arts education in our schools. Through direct grants, the NEA is able to support crucial pre-K through 12th grade art education projects. By establishing partnerships with our colleges and universities, The NEA is able to engage with our institutions of higher learning to provide necessary grants to preserve and restore historic works of art. As a former college art professor of 40 years, I had the privilege of working with the NEA to secure a matching grant which allowed the college to preserve and restore a historic painting by Aaron Douglas, the father of the Harlem Renaissance, a 1931 treasure. In order to continue to ensure that our students remain competitive in a global economy, we must continue to fund the arts. In addition to the cultural and educational impact of the arts, they play an important role in helping our veterans transition to civilian life and combat physical and mental illnesses. Through the NEA Military Healing Arts Partnerships, the NEA has worked with the Department of Defense to create an art therapy program to treat service members with traumatic brain injuries and associated psychological health issues at the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. This program places art therapy at the center of a multidisciplinary treatment approach. Through art therapy, our brave service members are able to receive specialized treatments that enable them to heal both their physical and mental wounds. Participants in this program have found relief and have seen vast improvements in sleep, communication, pain, and their ability to confront emotional challenges. This program has also invested in critical research on the impacts and benefits of this treatment. The NEA's budget for fiscal year 2017 was $148 million, just 0.004% of the federal budget. Through a relatively small investment in the arts, we were able to yield large returns. And not only are the arts culturally significant, but the nonprofit arts and culture sector is an economic driver, supporting about 4.13 million jobs and contributing to a gross domestic product of 4.2%, or about $729 billion. The arts are critical to our culture, to education, and our economy. And in all respects, it is the arts that make us human. And for this reason, I join my colleagues in requesting $155 million for the National Endowment for the Arts in fiscal year 2018 appropriations of the bill, and hope that you would certainly consider this request. Thank you very much for allowing me to testify.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any additional questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next two witnesses are en route. They should be here momentarily. So if we'll just wait a moment, our ranking member is coming, and Ms. Plaskett from
Mr. Chair?
Humanities. Yeah, Louis Slaughter, yeah. Louis Slaughter.
I agree with all those people. You've got a hell of a tough job this year.
So do you.
Mr. Chair? PILT kept coming up over and over and over again, as well as fire suppression, and then all the other things that people were asking for. And some of them were EPA water programs for clean water and sewer sanitation. I hope that these individuals will be supporting not only Mr. Simpson's fire bill, but also supporting to have PILT go back where it belongs in a Ways and Means as mandatory spending. Because I'm very nervous at the fact that they're pointing out that the PILT payments aren't high enough. And so if it stays in our budget and people are successful in making the PILT payments higher, Bureau of Indians, fair work that we do, national parks, forestry, all the other things that people listed in their comments along with PILT payment will be shortchanged. And it looks like, from what I'm reading in the press, we will be short on change in this committee to begin with.
Well, as you know, I agree with you that PILT should be handled as a mandatory program, and hopefully the authorizing committees will fix that for the 2018 budget. And we certainly should pass Mr. Simpson's bill as soon as possible, and hopefully we can work out an arrangement with the Senate this year.
I'll tell you something that was mentioned.
Mr. Simpson, you're recognized.
They're only that far away, they can hear me. Something else that was mentioned, it is, if you go out and do a timber sales and timber cut and stuff, reforestation is a mandatory thing. It's not on wildfire.
Right.
It's voluntary, as funds are available sort of thing. You need to make it mandatory that they do reforestation after wildfire.
Yeah.
You know?
And of course.
And that would mean that they couldn't take funds out of that part, at least.
And it was a good point, that we need to speed up the process of salvaging timber after these wildfires.
Yeah.
And allowing people in to start reforestation.
I've got
All right.
meeting I got to get to, but I agree with these two people, so.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, it's, Mr. Trump is currently announcing his executive order to start rolling back the clean water rules of the United States. So to the point that we have all these writers in the bill, I think they can come out and we can do it on the floor.
Anything that's already being done outside the committee, obviously, I don't think need to be in the bill, so I don't think.
I couldn't agree with you more, Mr. Chair.
What's that? They're here? They're coming? Walking to the door any second. That's great. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you.
And when you're ready, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman Calvert, Ranking Member McCollum, for the opportunity to testify on the Department of Interior, Environment, and related agencies appropriation bill, which will reflect federal support for the United States territories and possessions over the next fiscal year. Importantly, this legislation will serve as a statement of the commitment from the federal government to address some of our most pressing local needs. In the United States territory, there are nearly 4 million Americans, and we are too often left out of important programs or underfunded compared to benefits available to Americans living on the mainland United States. As a result, it is more difficult for the islands to improve economic conditions. Data from the Bureau of Economic Analysis illustrates the economic challenges facing the insular areas. The islands must transition from 100% reliance on imported oil to a clean, sustainable energy future and relief from power rates 3 times the national average. The territories continue to suffer from high unemployment. Last year, the unemployment rate in the Virgin Islands of the United States exceeded 10%. The economic picture is corroborated by data indicating lost population over the previous decade. By their mere geography, the territories are critically vulnerable to natural forces unique to daily living in an island environment: hurricanes, tropical storms, as well as daily sea blast, among others. As a result, we face a formidable challenge in adapting and responding to the effects on infrastructure, economic development, food security, and natural resources. The Office of Insular Affairs is responsible for generally administering the federal government's relationship with the territories on behalf of the Secretary of Interior. Top priorities for OIA, Office of Insular Affairs, have traditionally included initiatives for economic and infrastructure development. OIA assistance to territories account provides critical funding to support construction and maintenance of infrastructure, such as medical centers, schools, and waste systems. Let me give you an example. Our medical hospitals, we have to have a hospital on each island because of the near challenge of people being able to go from one place or another. So the duplication of those services require additional challenges on our systems, as well as having generators servicing on each island, and the lack of being able to get scale in a manner that other states have been able to do. We can't attach ourselves to grids in the same way that the United States can. in addition to assistance for climate change adaptation planning, all of which address top concerns identified by island leadership, and the less than adequate support is evident in our daily life. OIA assistance to the territories has seen an overall reduction in funding over the last 10 fiscal years. I would like to stress that it has been over 20 years since the Virgin Islands has had sufficient resources to build a new school. Our schools are crumbling. Because of the sea blasts, never mind the hurricanes and others, electrical circuiting, as well as pooling of water through the concrete over time, has left our children in deplorable state of condition in terms of their schooling. I would like to touch on the National Park Service budget as well. National park sites on the U.S. Virgin Islands include some of our country's most iconic tourist destinations. They also provide critical protection for terrestrial habitat, as well as opportunities for education, volunteerism in the parks. Many of our young people, after having worked summers in the parks, go on to maritime, marine biology, architecture, and other resources that come from those relationships. I have been pleased to see increases in federal support for the national parks in the Virgin Islands, and I would also like to urge for that to continue. In order to maintain and improve quality of life, create economic opportunities, and promote effective governance in the territories, I'm here before you to strongly urge an increase in the budget of the Office of Insular Affairs for its activities in technical and maintenance assistance to the territories. Last year, there had been great discussions with OIA about supporting our farmers. We're going back into agriculture after closing of Hovensa, the second largest oil refinery in the Western Hemisphere, that skyrocketed just on the island of St. Croix unemployment to 18% for a period of time. And OIA's technical assistance is really instrumental and invaluable to the people. While I fully understand that we need to look for ways to reduce the deficit, abandoning our responsibility to provide safe and reliable infrastructure in the territories and build resilience to the impacts of climate change is not the way to go. The last several cycles have placed impositions on the territories which force them to compete for already inadequate funds they receive. An increase in that account would go a long way in resolving these issues. Thank you for the opportunity to present my testimony.
Thank you for your testimony. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
your coming out today. Thank you. Any questions? No? Next.
No questions? Great, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Next, Ms. Slaughter from the great state of New York.
Yes.
You're recognized.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've been getting together like this for a number of years. It didn't seem to, there we go, okay. I just came out of Rules Committee, so my mind is still reeling with that stuff. But anyway, I've been very anxious to get over here because, you know, the NEA is very important to me. And I want to just talk to you about it. I've got a statement here, but I think I'd more or less just really like to discuss it with you. First, you know we put $145 million in for the arts programs in the whole country. And from that, we get about $9 billion back in the Treasury. It supports about 4 million jobs and a lot of good things. But I want to talk far beyond that. What's been discovered lately is that in a program between the military and the arts programs, they have discovered that more than any medicine that they could use, any counseling, anything else that they could do, by exposing these wounded veterans to arts programs, they are getting better. They give up that shoebox full of medicine they carry around, that effluvia of drugs all the time. They rejoin their family and society. Medicine couldn't do that for them. Years in a hospital couldn't do that for them. But part of that $145 million was able to do that. And you know that it was well worth that. It has been one of the most remarkable things. They have discovered, for example, that PTSD responds better to yoga than anything else. And because they found that out, they're also using it on people with Alzheimer's and kids with autism with some good results and hope. I saw Yo-Yo Ma, that magnificent cellist, in a concert one night at the Kennedy Center. He had 6 young men who had been in Iraq. And among those 6, they only had 2 legs. Yo-Yo Ma playing his cello like nobody else on earth can. And they were playing guitars and singing. And such great enjoyment. And I know from my own life, and I'm sure from yours, how you've been moved and concerned about this kind of thing. But to cut this program out, if it isn't worth $145 million for us to help all those soldiers that we have wounded in our name, to really get back into life, to be a part of life, to feel good about it again, to be creative in what the thing is doing. And how does that work? Because art opens up the left side of the brain. And then what they're able to do is take out the trauma and look at it. And once they can take it out, they can really begin to deal with it. Now, I had not thought about this that much for soldiers, but I knew what it did for children. I know we're used to seeing 16-year-old kids who were involved in crime and traumatized with those dead eyes just staring at us. And once we found that while they were incarcerated, if we could expose them to things just simply to open up both sides of the brain, that we could make a great change in their lives. They have to get out. What it's really things that they have not been talking about almost all of their lives. And there's something about working with your hands, something about what you're seeing with your eyes and your heart that makes it possible for you to do that. And one more thing, because I know you're very busy today, although I don't think you've got anybody else, maybe I'll take a minute more. What we get for art programs are smarter children. Kids who graduate from high schools in the United States who had art, the 4 years they were in high school, SATs, verbal, go up 9%. Isn't it points, rather? It is so cheap at the price. I mean, I wish we could give 3 times what we give because we get 3 times the results. We need to be doing so much more than we're doing, and people are eager for it. When I first started trying to save all this, it was considered poverty of the elite. And if they wanted to go, great, but if nobody else was going to be bothered with that. And then what we discovered by some work done at Davis, California, UC Davis, was the economic benefit of it. It has been absolutely, you know, in 1 year, not about 3 or 4 years ago, a study was done in New York City, and the Metropolitan Museum by itself got more money into that museum in 1 year than the Yankees, the Nets, the Knicks, and all the rest of the things they had there for sports combined. Imagine that. Art is something they come back to. Art is something you expose little children to. What's the first thing they do? They draw little stick figures. But it's so important that we do it for all of those reasons. But in these museums and in these art galleries is our history. Look at what you have on the walls in here. I mean, the art is the only thing that I know of that tells us who we were and who we are and who we hope to be. So I beg of you, maybe the most important thing you may do for civilization and society in this country is to put as much money as you can in the humanities and in the arts, because we get it back 100-fold. I promise you that. I can show you all the statistics and all the things about it, but I will tell you, if you were to go to Bethesda and see those programs of how those veterans are doing and what happens to them later. I mean, they've had enough experience now to know this is lasting. As a matter of fact, one of my staff members who's with me here today just came back from Fort Knox. He was out there last week with the Army. And he said Lieutenant Colonel had told him that a group apparently, that one of the most important things to him were the arts programs that he had and the kind of philosophy of you can create, you can be better. But it all comes back to the brain. It's when you open up both sides that you are really able to create a whole person. Please, please don't let that get killed. I feel like I've been begging you forever. And if you don't, as John Lewis said, he came up to campaign for me, and he said to everybody, now, I really want you to vote for her, and if you don't, I'll come back and step on you, non-violently. I'd hate to have to threaten you with that, but...
Thank you for your testimony. The arts and the humanities touches every congressional district in the United States.
Indeed, and brings a lot of money into them as well.
I recognize that, both Republican and Democrats, a bipartisan program. And
it always has been.
So, there's a lot of support for that, and I certainly take that into consideration as we move. And I know Ms. McCollum is a big supporter of the arts and humanities, and we'll be working together to try to resolve these things, so.
We would do incalculable harm if we did not keep that going. And we're better people than that. So thank all of you. Thank you for your hard work. Yeah, I know it's not easy. And this year is spectacularly hard.
Thank you. Appreciate everybody's testimony. We're adjourned. Thank you. Yep. Yeah. Well, okay.